computer. Okay, right. So that you're not going to be, if you don't want to say anything, that's fine. So if you want the slides after the email and I haven't caught you, just ping me an email in the box here, and I'll make sure we get a slide deck and a few goodies. We'll have a Q&A and a conversation sort of as soon as I've done the talk, which won't be very long, blessedly. There is, of course, if you're that keen to do it, I'm just going to give you the means to do all the things that you might want to do after this event. So here is how to get the book. I'm recommending at the moment that if you want the book cheaper, ask me, because Amazon are not recording the clicks thus far. I don't know what's going on with Amazon, but I'm doing it a bit on a small discount anyway. So there's all the details. Right, let us begin. So let me share the screen and then we get underway. Short presentation, long chat, ask any questions, tell me I'm wrong if you want to. And for those of you who don't know me, I used to be an author, I used to be a business consultant, I used to be a scientist. Then Brexit happened, my life has gone to shit after that, but I'm not unhappy about it, because I did it and it's my fault. But I spent the last 6 years sort of fighting Brexit somewhat foolishly. But let me see if I can find this. Now, can you see coming up a thing called Reboot Britain? No, you can't, can you? I've got the wrong screen. One moment, let's retry that. Can you now see Reboot Britain?
Yeah.
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 And can you now see it as a big screen like that?
Yes, Peter.
Perfect, we're working. So good evening all. Reboot Britain, we must do it. And that requires us to change minds on the question of pro-European attitudes and, get some realism into the discussion about Brexit. So that's what the book is about. I'd say sit on the fence carefully. I say a better Britain. I got Britain in the title first for the Brexiteers, because if we're going to move the dial on Britain, we have to talk about Britain. That doesn't mean say we wave flags necessarily. A better Britain and a better Europe for a better world. So that's what we're all about. My wishes after this event, I wish that we could gather together a cadre of Brexitists. And the ideal Brexitists are people who are willing to listen to other people's rubbish rather than talk about their own. So that's hairdressers, hospitality staff, counsellors, therapists, social workers, nail bar people, chiropodists, nurses, and probably a load of other people. I'm joking a bit. But actually, if we could get all the hairdressers in the world to talk to these Brexiteers and go, how do you want your hair doing? And have you thought about Brexit recently? They have those skills where people tell their hairdresser stuff that they won't tell, people when they're in the. So I think the hairdressing salon is a good environment for a Brexitism. But the book is really in several parts. It's got some stuff on what the future may look like in Brexit. So we've done with this group, or some of these group, we've done some 10-year scenarios in the book, thinking about how Brexit will unravel, because it will unravel. And as A.C. Grayling said, it will unravel of its own consequences without our help, but we need to provide the help. There's a bit in there about these so-called Brexit freedoms, ghosts and fantasies exorcised. There's a bit about Russia, because I wrote it very, very recently. And however sad the Ukraine situation is, it has, I think, opened a lot of people's eyes on all sides of this divide about Russian influence. And I think people are willing to talk about Russian influence because it's outside of the UK and they feel that there's a sort of an enemy outside. And then the second chunk of the book is really a book about psychology, sociology, and therapy, because a Brexitism is about identity level change. I shall come to that in a bit. There's a whole section on a branch of psychology, a practical psychology called NLP, and how we can use language, mind reading, body language, and sort of reprogram people a bit. That sounds a bit scary, doesn't it? But there's a bit on that in there. And there's a lot on putting the case for a united Europe. There's 400 or so benefits of rejoining the EU, and I found 170 Brexit freedoms, but none of them are true, obviously. So that's the beginning of the book. I'm just going to take a few samples out of it. It's impossible in 10 minutes to do justice to something that took 4 months to write. So there'll be a lot of gaps. But I'm going to take a section out of the first part of the book, if I can get. So people think the only way you can rejoin is to have a referendum, change the poll, the first past the post system or something like that. The truth is there's quite a lot of ways to rejoin. There's a whole chapter, and this is the first page of it, on different strategies to rejoin. And we could rejoin. There are preconditions to rejoining and getting rid of the arch Brexiteers, but let's separate that aside. There are at least 3 ways that I would call constitutional, or to do with the business of democracy. One of them is normal parliamentary business, that it may become expedient for politicians to say, hey, let's perhaps this Brexit thing is a bit bad, and perhaps we should do the customs union thing. And it's what academics call logical incrementalism, or what Andrew Adonis calls step by step. There are problems with incrementalism. There are problems with every strategy, but nonetheless, that's a normal way of doing it without having to raise the hackles of everyone, say we're going to have another referendum, because I don't think I could bear one myself. I don't know about you. Or, of course, it may become expedient, even though everyone's got their head down and say, let's try not to talk about Brexit at all. There may come a time, and I think that time is coming, where it becomes an electoral issue. So you could envisage the level of Brexit carnage becoming so bad in the country, and it is coming over the hill rapidly, that maybe Labour, Lib Dem, Gina Miller, or there could be a lot of rearrangements, but someone might turn and say, this Brexit stuff is not so good. So it could be done through a general election of some sort, whenever that happens. And I, of course, have included another referendum. Do we really want to do that again? Well, we may have to, but I think we would be legally correct to say it should be the same basis as the last one, which is simple first past the post. But I bet you bottom dollar we'd have to get 66% majority. That's not easy to do. We'd have to swing 8% on what we have now, both ways to get that. So that is by far from easy, I think. It's possible. But this book offers the skills to change one by one the minds that are changeable in the Brexit population. And so I had envisaged this cadre of people who would infect others and grow this movement so that we can go and do this therapy on people. But we have a few of us so far. So they're the constitutional ways. And then there are the other ways, aka rioting. And this is, some of you know this guy from Parliament. He's often drunk, I think, quite early in the day, and he's sort of Steve Bray's nemesis, and he can be quite horrible. I want to stay at home and let these people riot for me, because I think they're going to be very angry very soon. The thing about rioting is, and it does say in the book, that English people don't do rioting. We sit at home and file our nails and eat cucumber sandwiches. Remainers certainly don't do rioting, do we? We sit on the grass and drink Earl Grey tea. So, we're doomed. But these people might. And I'm willing to bet they're going to be very angry in 5 to 6 months' time. So we'll have to see about that. So there's a whole chapter on this, quite a long chapter on ways to rejoin. There are preconditions, as I mentioned. There's a whole chapter on the influence of Russia on this whole thing, which is, as I said, now discussable. I live in Kent in Medway, which is very Brexity, if that's a word. And if you talk about how Putin turned the minds of the West towards Brexit, and now look what he's doing, he's going on the Eastern Front, they're happy to talk about that. And they believe it, whereas they used to go Project Fear about everything else. It seems as though if the threat is not patriotic, it's from outside, they're happy to talk about it. So I've talked to a lot of people recently about the Putin effect, and however terrible it is, they actually get it. So they're now prepared to believe they were duped because some other people whose eyebrows were too close together, if you're quoting Alan Partridge, they like the idea that some awful person outside did it. What they don't like, of course, is we did it to ourselves. So actually this becomes a discussion item. And I think it's opened up a new possibility of getting on the table the fact that people were duped. So this is a sign that I carry around on my bicycle in Kent and gets me into trouble from time to time, but largely it starts conversations. And there we have it. So there's a whole section in there about Russia. There is another section. The main part of the second part of the book really is about, say, psychology, sociology, and therapy. I'm sure you've all got your own version of the Brexit psyche, but I've spent years, thousands of hours. My wife thinks I've wasted thousands of hours talking to people in cafes, bars, bus stops, hairdressers, anywhere really. And you kind of track some of the generalities of what sits inside the Brexiteer's brain. They're not all the same, of course, they're all different. That's the problem. But there are some, sort of similarities. And they're not all racists, of course, but racism does feature in quite a lot of the people around here. British jobs for British people, all that, straight bananas. And an awful lot of illusions. It's like a sort of load of fur that's been sort of put inside the brain. And of course, if you allow them, they will tell you what's inside their brain, which is part of what I call Brexitism. And I say to people, and I think this is why people say, well, we've done 5.5 years of this stuff. Surely we've tried everything. Yeah, we have. But I think that the trouble is we all expect, and I'm no different, we expect to go to a street stall, talk to someone for a couple of minutes and think we've converted. Well, there's the hard bit is to achieve a mind shift at an identity level requires quite high level skills, but even more important, lots of patience. And I know lots of people don't have a lot of patience. The other problematic area is unconditional positive regard. What does that mean? It means that when people are talking rubbish, you think to yourself, that's the best they can do. And you don't kind of immediately think, well, that isn't very good. I sometimes find myself sort of chuckling inside a bit when people say to me, I voted for Brexit because I don't like garlic. And I have had someone say that. And I voted for Brexit because I want to be able to land a £5 bass in the river. And I've been prevented by Ursula von der Leyen from doing that for all these years. And now I have my chance to fish the rivers dry. And just to give it credit, the credit that it deserves, I think is part of UPR. Therapists know a lot about this and time, not just in one lump. I think actually we need to nibble at these people. I often nibble at them over months, see them in a cafe once, bump into them again and come back like Columbo, go, oh, you remember we was talking about X and Y and Z. We can't really hope to do it by shouting at a march. They have other functions, they're useful in their own right, but often we're shouting out, we're proselytizing our stuff and they're proselytizing theirs. It's rather like a religious preacher. And there isn't a lot of listening going on. They have other functions, they're important for other reasons, but it is the quieter thing. And there's a bunch of skills in the book that sort of go alongside this. And this is borrowed from the field of therapy, from a chap called John Heron. And it basically says there are two sorts of influential communications. There are those directive styles where, take these pills and you'll get better, which is prescribing. I need to let you know that P&O Ferries was in part informed by, the breakdown of our British laws. That's giving people neutral information. And you're damn wrong, which is confronting, but that's the hardest style. All the ones, the directive styles, you can do them really quickly, but they're not usually as effective as these kind of styles that often leak into people over time, the sort of thing your hairdresser does. Catalysis, asking really awkward questions that leave people without closure, letting people get stuff off their chest, cathartic interventions. And the supportive ones, I can see why you might think that all the people that have come in here are all lazy, good for nothing sods. You know, that's, you're doing the best you can. So that's supportive behaviours. Loads in the book about this. I'm not going to dwell upon it, but the book sort of spends a lot of time explaining how you use this stuff and then blends in various psychologies alongside that. So that's that. And the rest of the book is around stories that explain how you do this in practice. Here's one I've picked at random. I play music from time to time, and over the time I've used the pub to systematically Brexitise people that don't want to be Brexitised. When I started, they didn't want to talk to me, of course, but because they all say that I'm a very good guitar player, they feel compelled to stay in my social circle. And of course, all of this stuff is very social. So they've started to ask me what I think about things now. And in particular, I met some UKIPers at an election in 2019 when I stood a cat for election and got more votes than I should have done. And they were very impressed with that. And so they now talk to me, even though they sort of prod me, they sort of want to talk to me. And they gave me all these stickers. They said, I suppose you want to put these up with yours. And I don't know if you can see them on the screen, but these are anti-vax, anti-this, anti-the other, quite dangerous stuff, I would say. And they're posting these in my area, in areas of of poor people and underprivileged people who have got perhaps minds that can be painted on afresh. And they are trying to whip up this kind of fascist stuff. It says innocuously on here, you know, join the White Rose. What is the White Rose? Well, it's fascism. They have excellent designers. I'm really jealous of the designs, but nonetheless, they were giving me this stuff. And this woman said to me, you know, I suppose you're going to tell me that COVID exists, aren't you? I said, well, I am, because I know her quite well. So I said, oh, straightforward, yes, why? She said, well, I've had SARS, I've had bird flu and COVID, and I went down the homeopathist and stuck a dock leaf on my arm, and now I'm cured. And I said, how unlucky are you to have all three of those things at the same time? And we then went through on a lengthy discussion about that, because I said, you do know I'm a scientist, used to work in pharmaceutical R&D. I can tell you that COVID exists. So I then moved into sort of directive style and put a bit of a hierarchy in. And the book sort of explains how you do all this stuff. Another little story, I guess, is the one that I'm frequently. I start conversations all the time because every day I go out with something, whether it's my bike, whether it's a T-shirt, whether it's a badge. And little things, actually, not, you know, the less shouty things often still start conversations. And where are we? I've lost the thing I wanted. I'll find it. I'm going to stop that. So if you go out doing this all the time, once or twice in 5 years, someone will get irritated by you. I guarantee that. And in my case, it's because I got punched by an ex-Metropolitan Police officer. Well, no, I didn't get punched by him, but first of all, he threatened me. Then someone else punched me, but he sent a very nasty letter to my home. Then he sort of deposited a load of stuff in the garden. Eventually, spray painted the front of the house and came round with a knife. So I'm just going to put knife into the box. I'd meant to have this ready, but that's it. So here is, oh no, it's the wrong one, I think. Knife. Maybe it is. Let me have a look. No, it's the wrong one. Bear with me. So there was a moment where I tried to take this guy to court, but the police refused to do him because he was a policeman. How surprising is that? So I ended up taking him to court. And this was one of the things he did. And he wrote this very nasty letter, which I don't think I can put the letter on the screen because it's so unpleasant. It says that I'm very undemocratic in no uncertain terms. But this is one guy I've confronted, and I've just won £3,000 from him. to put my front of my house right. And he's very cross about it. He says it's my fault that he was compelled to do this. So that was Ken. That was Ken scraping the front of the house with this knife, which he said wasn't a knife. He said it was a metal object in the submission that he made to me. But in the end, I've managed to I haven't converted him, actually. He's never going to convert, but he exhibited all the same sort of behaviours that I discussed here, the sort of mind of the Brexiteer. He tells me that because I've got stickers on my dustbin, that made him spray paint my house for 2 weeks and then use a knife. I followed him home that evening to find out where he lived and what have you. But it's a very long story. And the story of Ken is in there and lots of stories like that. So I want to get back through this now. So at the back end of the book, and then we're we're open for questions, there are these 170 Brexit freedoms. And you may be wondering what they are. Well, there they are. All of them just sort of morphed up there, the bag of sovereignty. So there is a whole resource, and there's a whole section where you can sort of have not witty responses to the sort of questions of the things that they say, but some general responses to some of the things that people do say. So the Brexit freedoms are a collage of everything that I suppose I've ever heard over thousands of hours of cafe conversation. And more importantly, there are 400 or so EU freedoms, EU benefits, which were compiled by Paul Cawthorne in Switzerland, who put this together for us. A fantastic resource. So if you're thinking, well, I don't know how to respond to that, there's an awful lot of factual material at the back end. There's sort of, they're not appendices, but very useful stuff. So I think it's time for me to stop chattering, and it's time for me to ask you to say anything about it. Have you got your own methods? You know, anything you want to ask me, and so on. So I'm opening it up to everyone now. I'm sorry to have ranted for 20 minutes or so. Right, so yes, I know about the, yes, probably put your hand up. Yes, Henry, straight away.
Well, I've got a preliminary question. Do Great Britain will be still Great Britain? Well, I do believe that sort of in 10 years, Ireland will be reunited and Scotland will be gone. So what do you think?
The 10-year scenarios, I think Scotland will be gone sooner than we think. I'll be brutally honest here. I'm always brutally honest, actually. But in 2014, I was of the view that separatism, made the world a less stable place. We were always better together, and I didn't want Scotland to have their independence. Frankly, I think I probably once said that that the SNP are, racists in kilts. Of course, I don't mean that fully, but you know what I mean. They're not racists. They not even wear kilts, so it's quite wrong that I said that. But of course, they have the legitimate right to ask this question again now, because they couldn't have possibly known that England was going to shoot itself in the foot, the back, the sides, and everywhere else. So, and I think that Scotland have a great future. There is a page on Brexit Rage, and we are working quietly with the SNP to try and help them to make the necessary moves. But I think Scotland will leave. I think, as following the line of your question, Henry, once the social and economic advantages of trade between Northern and Southern Ireland outweigh politics and religion, Irish unification becomes almost impossible to stop. Of course, we are talking about religion, and we're talking again about identity level beliefs, about wrapped up in country, well, not queen in this case, but that also follows. And once the House of Cards begins, I think Wales begins. I used to say on Downing Street, when I used to play music there, that England will eventually become the the People's Republic of Thurrock, which is a town in Essex. You know, it'll be, because London will want its independence, Cornwall will want its independence, the North East will want. So I think I'm really sad. I know I'm smiling about this, but I'm very sad that we've got to this point. But I think Scotland have a right to do what they want to do now. Ireland will almost certainly follow later. And once they've done, I think Wales will go. And Scottish independence is probably the quickest way for us to, one of the things that will make us realise that we got Brexit wrong, actually. So I'm not sad about it. Others may have different opinions, of course. Jump in. So Henry, come back to me. What do you think?
Well, I'm here on the continent, so I'm sidelines, but well, I agree with you. I would think that it's even easier for Ireland because in the Good Friday Agreement, it's all there.
Yeah.
You do one referendum and then they're gone. Then you see in the Republic and in Northern Ireland now, the biggest sort of opposition or majority parties, Sinn Féin, in both of them. So it's the same party. And also the demographics are working. And as you say, I mean, you see, and it will enhance even more, I've just seen the statistics yesterday or even this morning that the trade with the EU and UK just went down. And Northern Ireland is exempt of that, and everybody will understand this now. You see all these massive ferry lines now from Ireland directly to the continent and so on. So people will understand that and they will be gone. And I would think that Ireland will be reunited even earlier, but that's only my view.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the future is we're all wrong. So we took some wild guesses. About 100 of us put together these scenarios. There's about 15 pages of stuff in the book. And we thought that Scotland probably would get its referendum through somewhere before the election. And Ireland probably is, I think Ireland, we thought it was more difficult because of religion. You know, because it's not a rational thing. The economics and the social cohesion may be there, but you still we have people that come on our reboot meetings every week, and they still tell us that, you know, underneath the surface, there's still this irrational layer of, you know, which can stir up as well, frankly, and they're stirring up now in a very dangerous way. So, but we don't know. So, you know, it's in the realm of guesswork. Thomas, you had a question, and then I think we had some others. So, Thomas.
Yeah. Hello, Peter. Greetings. And hello to everyone. Firstly, just want to say congratulations on your book.
Oh, thank you.
Done. It looks very interesting. I have to get a copy. I did one myself a couple of years ago, which was I researched it. I'm an academic and philosopher and historian, and I was absolutely gobsmacked at the stupidity of Brexit. And I listed all the reasons. You know, I was doing forensic research as a historian into how it happened. I had various hypotheses. I mean, the Russia influence was one of them. I think now that has gone to the top of my list of probable causal factors. You know, this was a Russian military coup. And for those that haven't come across it or read it, there's a book by a professor of history at Yale University who's called Timothy Snyder.
Oh.
And it's the single most important book. It's called The Road to Unfreedom. Professor Timothy Snyder, who's a genius, he's a specialist in East European and Russian and Ukrainian history, like me. I did my degree at University of London in Russian history, and I did a PhD on the history of the intellectual dimensions of the Cold War. So, you know, I'm really sort of interested in this Russian dimension. And Timothy Snyder, who's an intellectual historian like me, what he points out is that we all took our eye off the ball. In 1990, I went to Moscow. I was involved with Philosophers for Peace and so on. We all thought the Russians were normal. nice, decent Europeans coming out of the cold, the end of the Cold War, we could have like peace. What we didn't know is this psychopathic KGB guy called Putin was plotting, you know, like Darth Vader style, a sort of destruction of the West. Now, Timothy Snyder explains the three-phase war. Brexit was phase one of a military intelligence coup. And he explains in enormous detail how it was done. Like Russia has a bunch of like full-time military intelligence people, the GRU it's called. And they operate out of a building in St. Petersburg, and they were flooding our social media in the weeks leading up to the referendum back in 2016. They were in collusion with, you know, the Leave Brexit lot. So anyway, read that book. And then, of course, phase two was electing Trump, which was done by Russian intelligence. And phase three is now the war on Ukraine. So I think that, you know, to me, once we know that, once we can prove that, it raises a constitutional problem, because the current government of the Tory party under this maverick guy were placed in power by that coup. It was a coup. Now, you know, this is the third way, or whatever. You've talked about rioting and, you know, blah, blah, blah. This is another way of doing it. And I've been in touch with a guy called Sir Tom Sawyers, who ran MI6 for years, and saying, like, surely if somebody, now we know this, that it was a military coup against Britain in an information war, like at what point, you know, where's the safeguards on that?
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for a reply to my letter. So I'm pursuing this at a quite high level. I think there should be an inquiry at the level of the Privy Council. There's no point doing it through Parliament, because Parliament is corrupt.
I'd like to hear more about this on a Monday meeting. Actually, we could segment off some time to discuss this in detail, Thomas.
Sure, I'm happy to share whatever I can, but you know, I don't know if did you put any of that in? Have you read Timothy Snyder's book?
No, I didn't. I was an academic, but I got over it, so to speak. I've tried to write this book in very simple brushstrokes so that it's accessible to everyone. One of the difficulties, of course, is we tend to think we're cleverer than the other side, and secretly we are. But well, we mustn't tell them. So
anyway, yeah.
So I'm going to come to some other questions, but I'd love to have you on Monday. Just tracking back before we go back to Monica. This isn't in the book actually to you, Henry, but this is the other book I'm writing called "Have I Got Fake Brexit News for You?" And I borrowed this graphic, which many of you will have seen. And this is what I mean by when social and economic value outweighs political and religious value, this becomes inevitable. And the Have I Got News for You book is a very different book. It parodies The Sun, The Daily Excess, but I haven't finished that yet. That's just work in progress. Let's go to Monica and then followed by Sonia, please.
Hello. Yeah, well, I am, for my sins, I am a Lib Dem. It's historically, I followed my son into the Lib Dems. And to be honest,
applause going around.
Well, I don't know about that. And I was very happy with this choice for a long time. I went on all people's vote marches and campaigned for pro-European things. And then, of course, they went very quiet on all of this, and they have come back with a policy on the EU that very, very much like you're sort of getting closer sort of alignment on Erasmus and veterinary things, and then finally their policy is to join the single market. There's no policy on rejoin yet. So I suppose my question is, and it's to anyone who cares to answer, is it worth me being active with them again? Are they a lost cause, or are they worth support?
Let's ask the audience. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say maybe. just to be perverse. I used to be a Lib Dem. I'm worried. I'm worried about all the parties at the moment. Not just. I really don't have a party now. I would work for Gina Miller possibly, but I don't have a party because it's such a cross-cutting issue. I'm worried about parliamentary fear of the Tories on all sides, and I understand why they're frightened. But what do others think? Well, they either agree with you or they agree with me.
And I was going to say, I mean, I think of all the parties, they're the most pro-EU, aren't they?
Yeah, I think
they're not coming out. You know, that's why I was kind of sticking with it, because I wondered, like you at one point, that I just don't know. I really don't know. But
they are, except I have met Lib Dems that are senior to my age who said to me, in 1972, the EU ruined my life. And I go, well, it's now 2021, isn't it? And, you know, get over it. And they haven't. So, sorry, James.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, with the point, one thing I've kind of used to get very frustrated about anybody who doesn't like the Tories. And an analogy I'd always give is that, well, whenever the Tory manifesto promises to preserve the NHS, well, all of the Tories that would love to get rid of it, they don't kick off, you know. Yeah. They are not like Corbynistas, you know, because they understand that the only way they get them what they want, is via a Tory government. And of course, if you had a Corbynista style row about whether to have abolishing the NHS in your manifesto, that's the surest way to ensure there isn't one. Yeah. And we kind of need to learn from that. I mean, basically, the first thing is to get rid of the Tories, and which means Lib Dems and Labour got to cooperate, on whatever works.
We hope they will, don't we?
Yeah. I think they're kind of seeing it. I mean, Starmer's got a little bit of common sense on that, even though he's very tepid. Yeah. Then, we can lobby a relatively sympathetic Labour-led government instead of a deaf Tory one. Yeah. So it's like, get them out. Now, that's not enough. That's not a sufficient condition, but it's definitely a necessary one. Yeah. I suspect all the Brexit pain and the fact they're just a kleptocracy, kakistocracy, and so on, will probably turn people against them. Yeah. But it's like, once you got rid of them, what do you then want them to do? One of mine, right?
I'm just because you're on, I'm going to announce you that James is a brilliant graphic artist. He's on the more extreme area than the meme makers, and for that I love him. But I know that sort of this hits really hard. But yeah, he makes things like this. But go on, James. Sorry, I'm not going to distract you.
Yeah, and what it is just we really need to learn from them, because you think the Brexiters, right? They didn't shut up about Europe for 40 odd years, right?
Right.
In fact, they so enjoyed whinging about it, they even had, invented an entire literary genre of, largely fictional grievances to whinge about, yeah? And this is where we need to, and we basically just need to learn from them. And I'm always trying to tell pro-Europeans this, yeah? There's no point making a big deal with it while the Tories are in power, but we got to get them out.
I'm going to pass to Sonia via a quick comment, because I'm going to say something controversial now. That whilst I spend a lot of time, I've spent all day today in Tunbridge Wells trying to persuade people not to vote for anyone other than the Tories. Brexit is such a cross-cutting issue that we need the Tories we never hear of, the quiet ones in the Conservative European Forum and other places. We still need their voices, like Dominic Breed, because there won't be enough people to make a movement of politicians up to say, wasn't that a bad idea, that Brexit thing? So we do need everyone, and labels therefore eventually become unhelpful. But so there are still some good Tories, but they're not the ones we tend to think of. Sonia, please.
just picking up on what you just said, I think it's going to be a really tough job to get the Tories out and the AT majority reduced while we've got a shambolic opposition, and we still have. I mean, that's a huge majority to overturn. And without some kind of progressive alliance approach, we're not going to do it. That's my pessimistic view, but that's not really what I wanted to talk about here. What I wanted to pick up on the Russian theme, because I think that is actually very, very important. And Twitter is full of lots of threads that actually define in detail the events of what happened around Cambridge Analytica, and how, who did what and how much money was involved, and this whole Russian influence that came kind of through that is, I mean, there are some threads out there that they come from really just sort of read and spout stuff for the sake of it, but they come from such really well-documented, timelined sources that you can go back and check, that is such a mind-blowing experience that you think, right, okay, Brexit was totally bought and paid for, and we don't even, the people on the streets don't even know it. So my thinking is, because, I mean, a few people do, and there is a lively discussion about it on Twitter, but Twitter's not everyone, it's a fairly small community. It's the kind of information that needs to get more generally known, especially before the next election. And the thing is, with Ukraine, so Russia is now the bad boy anyway because of its attitude to Ukraine. The whole thing is interlinked. It can be shown to be kind of interlinked. And there's a huge amount of sympathy for Ukraine, what's happening there. So I actually think part of our message should be playing on that sympathy factor for Ukraine and translating that into, well, look what Russia did to us, Brexit, but bring out the fact, because Aaron Banks, Farage, they've all got such key roles in that. It needs to be unraveled, and people, it's all very well forgetting it and shoving it under the carpet, but actually it's what totally overturned our democratic process.
I will respond to that, and then I'll come to a couple of others. Firstly, I do think I've conducted clinical trials with laboratory rats, not James's rats, the general public, in other words. So I think having conversations on Twitter, everything is valuable. My chosen method here in Brexit Medway is to go to a cafe and talk to people that don't agree with you, and gradually build a relationship, because they can't listen to you until you've listened to their story, and it takes hours, frankly. But I've tested this Russian thing, and they want to believe it. And I'm a single-celled organism as regards being an academic. I put it down to having 70 years of James Bond rammed down your throat. That they inherently embedded in the Brexit society is the fact that Russians are evil. So they want to believe the Russians did Brexit, so they can sort of sidestep the issue that they voted for it. And as long as we don't remind them too much of that, I don't care whether we have to go down through the dirt to say, but you voted for it. As long as we get to the result, there's a bit of me that doesn't mind. There's a bit of me, it's not all of me, but so I think that is a modus operandi to do that. To come back to your point and pour a bit more agony into the discussion, the first past the post thing, I've written about that in the book somewhere, and I think that's very difficult for this reason, that in a binary political system, for anyone to do that, someone has to give up power. I've never known a politician, even a green one, to give up the opportunity to have power. So if all the while Labour think they can win an election, I think this is difficult, not impossible, but difficult. When Labour stop thinking they can win elections, lots of other things become possible, but I don't know when that point is. So I'll come back to you, Thomas, in a while, but I want to see if anyone else is going to come in. So anyone want to come in on first past the post or anything else, actually, for that matter? Very interesting debate.
I know someone very well who worked on the Remain campaign at the head office. And after they'd lost, I asked him, I said, what did you do wrong? Not him personally, but as a team. And he said, we were too nice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are saying is, we need to be less nice. Anyway.
I mean, I use all those styles mentioned in the thing, and sometimes people say you mustn't tell people they're wrong. No, you can, but you have to have a significant bank balance to be able to say what you've just said about P&O, frankly, is a pile of horseshit. And you have to know them well to be able to say that. Or you can say it you can say the same thing, but without horseshit in it. There are different ways to language all that, but you can't do any of that until you have relationship. And a lot of the book is about building relationships with people you don't actually necessarily want to live with. And I think that's really hard, actually. So we're talking about change management at the sort of beliefs, identity level, rather than, means to an end change management we think about in business. If I pay you more, you'll work harder. People can go yes or no to that. But that it isn't a means to an end sort of change we're talking about here. We're asking people to stop believing in sovereignty, or that they can catch a 5-pound fish in the river and stuff. It's really difficult. So in the book I talk about the fact we should learn from Nigel Farage. That does not mean copying him. We need to better Nigel Farage. And there's a group I belong to that talk about, yes, we use facts where they're helpful, but we use emotional arguments backed up with facts, whereas all Leave did was emotion, take back control. No substance beneath any of those headlines. And as a musician, I'm really good at coming up with catchy headlines for everything. But what we must do, and that's where the brains come into this, is where you can necessarily then evidence your bullshit, as it were. So we need better bullshit to follow that line of inquiry. So yes, that's a huge agreement. Anyone else got anything to say about how do we change the game? Because if we keep repeating ourselves, it's like head banging. You just get a headache. There's a thing in NLP that says, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. So if you do anything different, you might get a different result. So, doing the same things, expecting a different result is one definition of insanity. Thomas, come back.
Okay, so I really just wanted to respond to Monica. She asked us as a group, is it worth being involved with the Lib Dems? I wanted to just comment on that. I think it is. Join any party you want. Even infiltrate the Tories if that's your thing, and try and change them from within, like Odysseus. But the reason I joined the Lib Dems, and I've been active-ish in France here, is because, to me, this is a philosophical struggle. You see, what Putin hates and what Trump hated, and what Farage and the right-wing populists, like we're facing the Le Pen catastrophe here in France, they have a hate word, and it's called liberalism. Putin is surrounded by ideologues who take their playbook from a right-wing fascist guy called Ivan Ilyin and a man called Alexander Dugin. They have a whole well-thought-out worldview, which is that the liberalism of the West is effete, evil, corrupt, and deserves to be destroyed. That's why they declared war on us in the 2016 Brexit election. They believe in their stuff, which is a form of hard right-wing Christian fascism. And you see, I don't. I'm a political philosopher. I believe in the project of the Enlightenment. I stand with Voltaire, and there is a tradition of intellectual liberalism which gave us social democracy. It gave us the Fabian Society. It gave us the kind of moderate socialism that Britain always, used to believe in. Yeah. And I think this battle is an intellectual battle, a philosophical battle. So yes, join the Lib Dems, and in doing that, you're taking a stand against these, frankly, evil, fascist, right-wing ideologues. So we shouldn't underestimate what's at stake here. you know,
I too would support joining any party that rocks your boat, actually. And say I was a Lib Dem member, I would join again, but at the moment I think they're a bit lost. So not joining is it's better to be part of something than outside. I was just discussing with a lady in Tunbridge Wells who had stopped voting Tory and now wouldn't vote for anyone. And I said, well, you're just going to let things happen. I said, that's that. And I spent a long time on the street with her today, sort of working on her. I want to come, because time is running out. Vicky's posed a question. You can either pose it or I can read it out if you want, Vicky. Vicky's asked.
Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it out.
Vicky's asked, any suggestion for those who admin Facebook pages, best ways to make use of them? Thoughts on how to stop our followers abusing gammon? We all have to have. I'm gonna use the yes and approach here, because we have to be very kind. And there is a page on, there's a whole section on how to do online work, which is different than the cafe. Online Brexitisms are much, much more difficult because they work on asynchronous behavior. People can walk out, they never come back to you, or they can calculate the response. There's a whole lot that's different on online than in real life. But I'm going to start a suggestion and then open it up to everyone. I think that, as a principle, I think that Facebook pages should be open to all, even if that means you have to deal with the odd strange person, because you mustn't let the tail wag the dog. If it's an echo chamber, well, that's a social group. It's a different thing. So I think they should be, as a principle, open, because that way they're inviting. I think they should be moderated well so that people are relatively kind to all but the bots and the trolls. I think they should also be, it's tough love. You're hard on the bots and trolls, but if people say, well, hang on, I've got a question, they should get answers to their question. What do others think?
Well, with online, and I mean, I'm probably one of the most foul-mouthed people on Twitter.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
And I kind of and sometimes I mean, you've seen me at work, right, before I got finally banned, yeah, and I'll say and as you know, I go like, right, you knew what you voted for, so you must have wanted this to happen, yeah, or well, difference between and basically, but I'm kind of, much as I enjoy being a complete bastard to them, yeah, including memming them if they make the mistake of showing their face, yeah. I sometimes think, Jesus, I'm probably just making them double down, So you go, well, okay. I as a Remainer, I wanted to stay close to our friends and NATO allies. You as a Brexiter chose to, side with Putin's Russia or hostile foreign power. That's the difference between us, yeah. But that doesn't seem to go down very well. Or better yet, the problem with the border, yeah. So, you must have wanted more Syrian migrants then, eh? You knew what you voted for, so you knew the Brexit. Of course, that don't go down too well. So much as I enjoy winding the bastards up, I'm also aware it don't work. That's the problem, and so how to make them change their mind.
I would never say it never works, but this is the page, or one of the pages from the book on online, which people can probably read if they're on a computer. But what I would say about that, if you're going to tell someone they're a bit of a dick, it's better to be in a pub or a cafe with where you can get clouted, where you can smile at the same time while you do it. Because online, you have no opportunity to smile, and NLP teaches us that text is less than 10% of the communication message.
Yeah, that's true.
You can do exactly the same thing online and find it's rejected. Has anyone here, feel they've been hard done by because they've said, would you like to go for lunch? And someone said, how dare you? And they've got a completely different meaning than perhaps the one you intended. So the whole thing of online is full of confusion, really. And, and people can run away. They do what I call dump and run. They go, you're an idiot. And then you never see them again. So you can't finish the conversation, really. And perhaps the general rule is to be more circumspect and ask more questions to try and draw them out and build. You have to build the relationship stronger to be able to tell them they're wrong. So you can't use those directive styles so easily online. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't use them, and I've done them. And I will tell people if they're wrong, because I've for 28 years, I've been paid a lot of money to tell business leaders when they're about to go over a cliff. But the Brexiteers want to go over the cliff. That's the difference.
The Russian trolls, I know how to deal with them now beautifully. Yeah, you can spot them because they'll support the, they'll go on about the Nazism, and you go, listen, Comrade Trotsky, you ought to worry about getting conscripted, mate. Yeah. Is savor the joys of fighting the best equipped insurgency in history in a violently hostile population. Enjoy going to Chernobyl. That shuts them up.
I usually find that if you find out more about them, it's harder for them to run away or to avoid, to shapeshift and run off and do something different. So in real life, that means I was talking to a guy for about 2 hours in a pub, and just to make a break between he was going through all the reasons he voted for Brexit, and I was letting him pour it all out, and gently I was saying, well, do you realise that? Very soft. And then just to give him a break, I said, tell us about your family, expecting this to be really easy. And he went, well, I've got 2 kids. He's about my age, 60 something. He said, they're both in their 30s. I said, okay, what sort are they? So I've got a daughter and a son. The daughter's at home, she doesn't work because nobody recognises her skills. I let that go. I thought, I haven't got time. By the way, Paul, I plugged you about 400 benefits a while ago. So I let the daughter go. I said, what about your son then? Oh, he says, well, he's getting a lot of racism. I said, well, tell me more about that. I think being like Columbo is the sort of part of being a Brexit. You're asking really good questions and leaving and looking really pensive. So I said, well, tell me about your son. He's getting all this racism. I said, well, what's happening with him then? He said, well, he's in Parkhurst, and inside I thought, that's a maximum security prison. It is not a parking offence. It's a Parkhurst offence, in fact. So I went, oh yes, I said, and how's the racism going on? And he's a white guy, so he says, well, all these blacks are beating him up. And inside, I thought, I really want to say at this point, well, don't go to prison then. But in fact, I just went, oh, I said, that must be really hard. That's supporting in Heron's book, you see, lots of supporting. Yeah, that must. And then I thought, well, we've done enough relaxation, we'll get back on the thing. So it wasn't a very profitable excursion to find out about his family. He was very angry about them, and he thought they were both losers. Yeah, anyway, let's come back onto the thing.
Can I just say something very quickly? Because I now live in Toryland in Oxfordshire. And the interesting thing is that in the last month, I have met 5 people who voted Brexit, who, because of what's happening in the country today, have changed their minds. Now, I'm not saying we should wait for things to get worse, but what I am saying is that the tide is turning. I'm certainly, I'm in Brexit land here. This is, my MP is the one for Henley-on-Thames.
Right.
Oh, help me. Oh, he's a nasty man.
Yeah. Anyway,
I just wanted to add my little bit.
I realise some people will want to go shortly. I know there's still a few questions, so I'm going to do those, and then I want to do I want to wrap up for those that want to go soon. But I'm open. I said there would be social networking. I know there's a few people that still got questions, so I'm going to do the plug for Mondays. If you enjoyed this, we have a fully participative session every Monday, and Reboot Britain is a non-party political organisation that tries to do 4 things. It does it to various levels of competence, I have to say, given our numbers. But we try and break this parliamentary paralysis, this wet sort of sponge effect that nobody wants to say the word Brexit, and that doesn't relate to any particular party. It relates to all. And the Tories, of course, are trying to airbrush the word out of existence, which is why we must not let them do that. So that's all the lobbying stuff. The first objective is breaking parliamentary paralysis. We also slightly churlishly think, pompously think that we should take back control of mainstream media. We have Mike Cashman on here, who does a lot of mainstream media, phones Radio 4 constantly. I phone AOBC occasionally. we can't buy Rupert Murdoch's media, but we can make a bigger footprint in it. And we have, coming back to your social media point, we have various amplifier groups to make sure that our footprint, is larger than the Leave footprint. So we need to get clever at all of that. So we try and do that. So objective 3 is better reach into social media. And the book, of course, is Changing Minds One by One. It's very inefficient, I would say. It is often very, very effective, however. So, educating people, helping them to climb down from their Brexit unicorns and what have you. And it's a slow process. And of course, we have some other groups we work with who are trying to make the bridge between the EU to say we're not completely awful just because we left. And there are people I'm working with in the European movement, other places, trying to build bridges in Europe to make sure that when we have leavened the Brexit contingent, that it's possible to rejoin. Because I don't think there's two things that occupy the minds of Europeans right now from speaking to people in Brussels. They're really happy they don't have to deal with Nigel Farage anymore. They're delighted about that. But the second thing is they're able to do what they want to do without having Britain going, we want to have it our way. And we have seen that the legendary European entropy, slowness, and everything else that is a criticism that's made of Europe, they seem to have moved very quickly, perhaps because we left, but also they haven't had us at the table saying, oh, I don't think we will quite want to agree with that. So it may be that we were the cause of their slowness, or a cause, let's not put it the cause. Mike, let's come to you. But that's my pitch. I will send you, anyone that wants to have the slides and the other goodies. If you haven't put your email in the chat box, please do that, but I'm still open for questions. So I'm not going to say no more about the book, apart from the fact I'd love if you told someone about it. And if anyone wants me to do this again, I'll do it next Thursday. But that's enough for me now. Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment because people can get very discouraged by saying, oh, you can't persuade a Brexiter, they're set in their ways. And it's the rule of thirds. It's actually expressed by the Dominic Cummings character in the documentary by Benedict Cumberbatch. A third, and the percentages may not be exact. I put this in the chat. A third are broadly with us. That's great. Look after them. Hopefully that'll be okay. A third are radically opposed. Stuff them. We're never going to persuade them. We can have the odd duel on social media. But the ones we actually need to persuade are not those who are busily arguing on social media. It's the ones in the middle who are sort of, who are undecided, because 2/3, Peter talked about 66%, that's good enough. So, I have this saying, all generalizations are wrong, which
generally
demonstrates that it's a little bit of a fallacy. But, if we generalize about Brexiters, we may, about people who support Brexit, we may confuse ourselves and we may misdirect our energies. So worry about the ones who are on the middle, who may be all fed up with it and not on social media at all. But as Peter says, they're in the cafe, they're at the bus stop, they're in the pub, they're at the supermarket.
Yeah, I did something in the supermarket just now. He was talking about the queue in I said they only had 3 open in the supermarket. I said they've all left, and he looked at me. I'd got a mask on at the time, which announced me without him having to work it out. So I had one of these on. He worked it out very quickly, actually, and he smiled. So I thought that, okay, we know where we are with this. A little
related tip, especially for those of us like me who are of a naturally shy, retiring nature. We talked about getting involved in political parties, but an exercise for those with introvert preference, which I have undertaken myself, is go out sometime and just maximize the number of people that you talk to. So, because conversations can start on anything, it can go anywhere.
So having said it takes time, spread out over time, there's also a section in the book which said, well, you can do it quite quickly as well. Some people don't require all that. So he said, bloody queues. I said, all the foreigners have gone home. And he went, yeah. No, I said, no, seriously. I said, they've gone home. He said, yeah, but they could get the managers out, couldn't they, to serve? I said, that might solve today's problem for you. I said, the thing you're looking for is government. Yeah, I said, because they sent these people home. They're mostly foreigners working in these counters here. I said, so, you know, and I made sure that other people listened into it as well. And we were having a huge agreement, and we were walking down these parallel lines. I said, you know, I said, it's what we never work. Yeah, we should have thought of that before. I said, yes, we should. There we are. I just left it. So actually, some of the best Brexitisms are where you leave unfinished business. Yeah, question marks rather than full stops. Patricia, then Joe.
No, not me. I've stopped.
Yeah, I've got to unmute myself. I thought we are working hard because we live in Brexit land, and well, I'm in the Labour Party still, even though I don't go to the meetings yet. At the moment, because but we are working hard with the union. Some of my friends are the union people, you see, and we are pushing things like, this is not fair, whatever you're going through, and it's an anti-government thing. So we might have a certain role in trying to get that third middle to change their minds a bit and vote for different people.
Absolutely. And since Paul stepped in, you missed this moment, Paul. I did show some of your 400 or so Brexit benefits. Paul's an economist, by the way, living in sort of between the Swiss and Italian border. Thank you, Paul, for that.
Okay, thank you. Peter, yeah, I've got to go. Unfortunately, I've rushed and got here late.
That's understood. We're a bit like, I normally finish bang on time, but I said there'd be a sort of hangover period here. Although
I was playing football, that's my excuse.
But thank you. We did cover your work there. So
I'm looking forward to getting the book. Hopefully soon.
Yeah, I'll sort one out. That's fine.
Yeah.
Anyone else? And then it's general discussion.
Bye.
On a Monday, we don't spend time saying, isn't it awful? Because that is therapy. We spend time saying, it is awful, but what can we do about it? I suppose is what we constantly try and do on a Monday. But anyway, any final questions? Then I'll probably bring it to a conclusion. So thank you, Paul.
Okay.
I've got one final comment before we break up. The one word that nobody's mentioned on this call, and you didn't mention, Peter, is truth. I'm putting my philosopher's hat on. You see, I think we win arguments because we speak the truth. I'm very old-fashioned. And I just want to tell people, if you don't know, I'm working with a guy called Tom Brake, who was a Liberal Democrat minister in the coalition government. Him and I are trying to get a bill in Parliament that MPs have to tell the truth on all official matters when they're asked questions. Now, is
this sort of a downsizing?
It's a serious project. If anyone wants, email me about it. Tom Brake is he runs a thing called Unlock Democracy. I run a peace institute, and
Tom Brake's got a copy of this.
I don't think we're going to stop, because Brexit is only a symptom of all the other stuff that's going wrong in British society. When we have people that don't have to tell the truth, then they lie, default. In the old days, politicians had a certain dignity and gravitas. There was an unwritten constitution, and they told the truth, or they resigned if they were caught out. But now, so anyway, I just thought I'd let you know, me, Tom Brake, and others.
I think the truth is probably a longer Zoom session than we have time for.
I know. I just thought I'd raise it as a flyer. And
I think it's a new book title: The Truth, Brexit, and Other Lies.
Okay, good. Go for it. Yeah, but congratulations, Peter, and
very much.
Good luck with the book.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions or comments, I'm going to thank you very much for coming on this. If you have anyone that would like to come, I'm happy to run this a few times over the following weeks So we'll see how it goes. I might do another one if you think it was worthwhile, but you can let me know. If anyone hasn't got the details, I've just popped my email in the chat box, and it's good night from me and good night from you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Right.